I pressed my palm flat against the cool marble of the engagement party's balcony railing and watched my sister Vivienne accept a diamond ring that had been mine in another lifetime. The applause from inside the ballroom washed over me like distant thunder. I didn't flinch, I didn't cry. I simply observed, cataloguing every detail with the precision of someone who had lived this exact moment before. Except then, I had been the one standing beside Adrian Westbrook, wearing white, smiling until my face ached, believing I was finally enough. This time, I wore black. This time, I was invisible. And this time, I knew exactly what would happen next. In my first life, I died at 28, drowning in the lake behind the Westbrook estate during what was supposed to be our 5th wedding anniversary celebration. The official report called it an accident. My family called it tragic. Only I knew the truth as the water filled my lungs, that Vivienne had pushed me and Adrian had watched from the shore, doing nothing. But let me start earlier, because that's where the real story lives. I was born Clara Ashford, first daughter of the Ashford pharmaceutical empire, 3 years before Vivienne entered the world like a supernova designed to make everything else dim by comparison. Where I was quiet, she sparkled. Where I was dutiful, she was dazzling. Where I worked methodically through problems, she charmed her way around them. Our parents never said they loved her more. They didn't have to. When I turned 22, my father arranged my engagement to Adrian Westbrook, heir to the Westbrook Investment Group. It was a merger disguised as romance, but I didn't care. Adrian was handsome, intelligent, from the right family. I thought I could build love from compatibility. I was so naive it physically hurts to remember. The wedding was everything a society wedding should be. 300 guests, orchids imported from Thailand, a dress that cost more than most people's homes. I looked beautiful in the photographs. I looked happy. I was neither. Because 6 months into our engagement, Vivienne had begun spending more time with us. She would join our dinners, laugh at Adrian's jokes with a brightness I could never quite manage, touch his arm in ways that seemed casual, but never were. I noticed. Of course I noticed, but every time I mentioned it, Adrian would look at me with such patient disappointment. "You're being paranoid, Clara. Vivienne is your sister. I'm trying to be family." So I swallowed my concerns. I smiled. I played the role of the understanding wife, while my husband and my sister built something I couldn't name, but could feel growing like a tumour between us. After the wedding, it got worse. Adrian would come home late, smelling of Vivienne's perfume. He would take calls in his study with the door locked. He would forget our anniversary, but remember to send Vivienne flowers on her birthday. And, when I confronted him, carefully, so carefully, because by then I had learned that expressing hurt made me seem hysterical, he told me I was suffocating him. "You're so intense, Clara, so demanding. Can't you just be easy like your sister?" I tried to be easy. I stopped asking questions. I stopped requesting his time. I managed the household, attended the charity functions, played the perfect Westbrook wife while slowly erasing myself piece by piece. My parents were no help. When I finally broke down and told my mother about my suspicions, she looked at me with such cold disappointment. "You're married to one of the most powerful men in the city, Clara. Whatever small discomforts you're experiencing, you handle them quietly. The Ashford name doesn't survive scandal." Vivienne, for her part, was a master. She never did anything overtly wrong. She was simply always there, the concerned sister, checking on her lonely sibling, spending time with her brother-in-law because Clara works so much. She would hug me in public, whisper how lucky I was, then meet Adrian's eyes over my shoulder, with an intimacy that made my stomach turn. I collected evidence once: call records, receipts from hotels, photographs from a private investigator that showed them together in ways that left no room for interpretation. I brought them to my father. He looked at the folder for 30 seconds, then closed it. If you embarrass this family with these accusations, I will cut you off entirely. Adrian Westbrook is an asset. You are replaceable. I should have left then, should have taken my trust fund and disappeared. But I was so tired, so worn down by years of being told I was wrong, seeing things that weren't there, too sensitive, too much, too little. So I stayed. And on our 5th anniversary, during the party Vivienne had helped plan, she found me by the lake. We were alone for the first time in months. She smiled at me with something like pity. He never loved you, you know. He only married you because father made him. But he loves me. He's always loved me. I don't remember what I said. I remember the anger that finally broke through my careful composure. I remember shouting. I remember her face changing, the mask dropping to reveal something cold and calculating. Then I remember her hands on my shoulders, surprisingly strong, the shock of the water, the way my dress dragged me down like it wanted me dead too. And Adrian's silhouette on the shore, perfectly still, watching me drown. I woke up on my 19th birthday. For 10 full minutes, I lay in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling with the pink roses I had begged to have removed at 21, and I couldn't breathe. My lungs felt full of phantom water. My throat burned with screams I hadn't released. Then I sat up and looked at my hands, young, unscarred, wearing the sapphire ring my grandmother had given me before she died, a ring I had lost years ago, or would lose, or time was broken. I was broken, or perhaps, impossibly, I was whole again. I went to the mirror. 19-year-old Clara stared back at me, soft around the edges in ways I'd forgotten, still believing the world was essentially good. I wanted to weep for her. Instead, I smiled. Not this time, I told my reflection. This time, you survive. The first thing I did was check the date. September the 14th. 3 months before Adrian and I would be introduced at the Winter Gala. 3 months before my father would decide Adrian was the perfect match for his eldest daughter. 3 months to change everything. I didn't leave my room for 2 days. I needed to think, to plan, to sort through 9 years of memories and extract every useful piece of information. I knew where Adrian's money was hidden. I knew which investments would fail and which would succeed. I knew every vulnerability in the Westbrook empire. But more importantly, I knew the truth about Vivienne. In my first life, I had been so focused on her relationship with Adrian that I had missed what was really happening. Vivienne wasn't in love with Adrian. She was in love with the idea of taking what was mine. Every achievement I earned, she shadowed. Every relationship I built, she infiltrated. When I graduated top of my class, she suddenly discovered a passion for academics. When I began playing piano, she took lessons until she was better. I wasn't her sister. I was her measuring stick. And Adrian? Adrian didn't love either of us. He loved power, convenience, and the path of least resistance. He had married me because it was expected. He had wanted Vivienne because she made him feel desired instead of obligated. They were perfect for each other. So I decided to let them have each other. When I finally emerged from my room, my mother noticed something had changed. "You look different," she said over breakfast, studying me with the clinical assessment she usually reserved for her garden roses. I cut my hair. I hadn't, but I had changed how I carried myself. Shoulders back, chin level, eyes that met hers instead of dropping away. "It's not the hair," she frowned. "You seem harder." "I'm growing up," I said simply, and turned my attention to my fruit. Vivienne bounced into the dining room moments later, 16 and still unaware of the woman she would become. She was beautiful in that effortless way that had always made me feel like I was assembled from spare parts. But now, I looked at her and saw something different. Potential. Potential cruelty. Potential selfishness. But also potential for a different path if she wasn't chasing me. "Clara, you're finally awake. I thought you died up there." She laughed at her own joke, and I felt my chest tighten. In 9 years, she would watch me actually die. "Just needed some rest," I said. "Well, Dad wants to see you in his study. Something about your future." She rolled her eyes. "Probably another boring internship at the company." I nodded and finished my breakfast in silence, cataloguing the normalcy of this moment. Vivienne, chattering about some boy from her school. Mother, responding with half her attention while checking her phone. The morning light streaming through windows I had forgotten were this clean, this clear. This was my chance to do it differently. My father's study smelled of leather and cigar smoke, a combination I had once found comforting. Now, it just reminded me of being erased. "Clara." He didn't look up from his papers. "You're 19 now. It's time to start thinking seriously about your future." "I agree," I said. That made him look up. I never agreed quickly. I always needed convincing, coaxing, detailed explanations. "I want to propose something," I continued before he could speak. "Let me work for the international division. Send me to Singapore or London. I want to learn the business from the ground up, but outside the family spotlight." His eyes narrowed. "Why?" "Because if I'm going to be valuable to Ashford Pharmaceuticals, I need to understand more than just the sanitized boardroom version. I need real experience, and I need to build my own reputation, separate from being just your daughter." It was exactly the kind of ambitious, pragmatic statement he respected. I watched him consider it, weighing the benefit against the inconvenience of having his eldest daughter overseas. "Singapore," he said finally. 2 years. You work your way up legitimately. No special treatment. If you prove yourself, we'll talk about a real position in leadership." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. You might hate it." I smiled. No, I won't. Because I already knew what 2 years away would buy me. Distance from Adrian, time to build my own wealth and connections, and, most importantly, the chance to let Vivienne become the Ashford daughter everyone focused on. The winter gala came and went. I attended, met Adrian briefly in a receiving line, felt nothing but distant curiosity about the man who had been my husband. He was handsome, charming, utterly forgettable now that I knew what lay beneath the surface. I saw him notice Vivienne, though, saw the way his attention sharpened when she laughed. She was 16, too young for him to pursue, but I watched the seed being planted. Good. Let it grow. I left for Singapore in January. My parents saw me off at the airport with minimal fanfare. Vivienne hugged me, whispered that she would miss me, and I felt nothing but the memory of her hands pushing me into dark water. "I'll miss you too," I lied. Singapore was salvation. I worked 12-hour days at the Ashford Pharmaceuticals regional office, starting in supply chain logistics, because that's where you learn how a company actually functions. I took language classes, Mandarin, Malay, Japanese. I attended every networking event, learned the names and ambitions of everyone who mattered in Asian pharmaceutical markets. But more importantly, I invested. I knew which tech startups would explode. I knew which real estate markets would boom. I took the modest trust fund I had access to and systematically, carefully began building my own fortune. Within 6 months, I had tripled my money. Within a year, I was independently wealthy enough that I would never need my family again. I also learned to be alone without being lonely. I made friends, real friends, who knew me as Clara, not Clara Ashford. I dated casually, learning that I was capable of attracting interest without performing the careful choreography I had done with Adrian. I discovered I was funny when I wasn't trying so hard, that I was intelligent without needing validation, that I was enough, exactly as I was. It was the first time in either of my lives that I was happy. My parents called monthly. Vivienne texted occasionally, usually when she needed advice or wanted to share some achievement. I responded dutifully but distantly. I sent appropriate gifts. I maintained the appearance of a dutiful daughter and sister, but I didn't come home. When my 2 years were nearly up, my father called with a proposition. The Australian division needs restructuring. Before you come back, I want you to spend 6 months in Sydney handling it. Consider it your final test. Of course, I said, and felt the last chain of obligation settle lighter on my shoulders, because I knew what was happening at home. Vivienne, now 18, had begun attending society events. Beautiful, charismatic Vivienne, who had always lived in my shadow, was suddenly the Ashford daughter everyone noticed. And Adrian, now 27 and facing pressure from his own father to settle down, was noticing her right back. My mother mentioned it in one of our calls. Vivienne has been spending time with the Westbrook boy. Adrian, you remember him from the gala? Vaguely, I said, examining my nails. He's very taken with her. Your father is pleased. It would be an excellent match. How nice for them. There was a pause. You don't sound bothered. Why would I be bothered? Clara. My mother's voice sharpened. You're 21 now. You should be thinking about these things yourself. Marriage, family. You can't hide in Singapore forever. I'm not hiding, Mother. I'm building something. There's a difference. She hung up dissatisfied, but I didn't care. I had stopped caring about her disappointment somewhere between drowning and being reborn. I came home for Vivienne's engagement party. I had been gone for nearly 3 years. I had transformed from the soft, eager to please Clara into something else entirely. Still polite, still poised, but with an edge of independence that made people uncertain how to categorize me. My father picked me up from the airport personally, which was unusual. You look well, he said, which was his version of surprise. I am well. The Australian restructuring was impressive. The board noticed. Good. We drove in silence for a while, and I watched the familiar city scroll past the windows. It looked smaller than I remembered. Less important. Vivienne is marrying Adrian Westbrook next June, my father said abruptly. I assume your mother told you. She mentioned it. And I hope they'll be very happy. He glanced at me sharply. That's all? What else would there be? Adrian expressed interest in you first, at that gala years ago, but you had already left for Singapore. I smiled. Then it worked out perfectly for everyone. My father looked like he wanted to say more, but we arrived at the house before he could. The sprawling Ashford estate looked exactly as I remembered, beautiful and cold, a museum dedicated to appearances. Vivienne met me at the door. She was stunning now, 20 years old, glowing with the confidence of someone who had never been truly challenged. She hugged me with what seemed like genuine warmth. Clara, finally, I thought you were never coming home. I almost didn't, I said truthfully. She pulled back, studying me. You look different, more, I don't know, sophisticated? 3 years of international business will do that. Well, I'm glad you're here for the engagement party. Adrian is dying to meet you properly. He's heard so much about you. I doubted that. I'm looking forward to it. The party was exactly the kind of ostentatious display my parents loved. 500 guests, a string quartet, champagne towers, and ice sculptures. I wore the black dress I had selected carefully. Elegant, but not attention-seeking. Expensive, but understated. I blended into the background perfectly. Adrian found me anyway. "You must be Clara," he said, materializing at my elbow with 2 glasses of champagne. "The mysterious sister I keep hearing about." I looked at him properly for the first time in this life. Still handsome, still charming, still utterly empty behind the eyes. "And you're Adrian. Congratulations on your engagement." "Thank you." He studied me with open curiosity. "Vivienne says you've been in Singapore, Asia, building your own empire." "Hardly an empire, just learning the business." "Your father speaks highly of your work, says you're the smartest of his children." I smiled slightly. "He's never said that to me." "Maybe he doesn't want you to know it." Adrian moved closer, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Between us, I think he's a bit afraid of you now. You're not what he expected." "Few people are what others expect given time." He laughed. "Cryptic and beautiful. If I had met you first—" "But you didn't," I interrupted smoothly. "You met Vivienne. And from what I can see, you're perfectly matched." Something flickered in his expression. Disappointment, maybe, or wounded pride. Men like Adrian hated not being the most interesting thing in a room. "Still," he said, "we should have dinner sometime. The 3 of us. I'd like to get to know my future sister-in-law better." "Perhaps," I said, non-committally. Vivienne appeared then, looping her arm through Adrian's with easy possession. "There you are! Stop monopolizing my sister. She just got back." "Just getting acquainted," Adrian said, but his eyes stayed on me a moment too long. I watched Vivienne notice it, watched the tiny tightening around her mouth, the way her grip on Adrian's arm became just slightly more insistent. Good. Let her feel it. Let her wonder. The actual engagement happened an hour later, orchestrated for maximum theatrical impact. Adrian got down on one knee in the centre of the ballroom, under a spotlight that had been positioned specifically for this moment. The ring was enormous, tasteless, expensive. Vivienne cried prettily. The crowd applauded. My parents beamed with satisfied ambition. And I stood on the balcony in my black dress, watching it all, with the detachment of someone observing a play they had already seen. This was the moment everything had started in my first life. This engagement party, except with me in Vivienne's place and Vivienne watching from the wings with that peculiar hunger in her eyes. Now the roles were reversed, and I felt nothing but profound relief. The wedding preparations consumed the next 8 months like a beautiful, expensive monster. I was asked to be maid of honour, which was perfect. It meant I was expected to be involved, but not central. Supportive, but not spotlight-seeking. I played the role flawlessly. I helped Vivienne choose flowers. I organised the bridal shower. I smiled at dress fittings and listened to her excited planning. And I watched. I watched Adrian grow increasingly distracted. He would stare at his phone during dinners, arrive late to events, seem mentally elsewhere even when physically present. Vivienne tried to ignore it at first, then began making excuses for him, then started snapping at people around her when the stress built too high. I watched my parents grow concerned. They had expected smooth sailing toward a triumphant merger. Instead, Adrian was acting like a man being dragged toward marriage rather than walking willingly. And I watched Vivienne transform into something brittle. The easy confidence began developing cracks. She started checking Adrian's phone, questioning his whereabouts, demanding more of his attention. She became the insecure, demanding partner she had once watched me be with quiet superiority. At a family dinner 3 months before the wedding, it came to a head. "Where were you this afternoon?" Vivienne asked Adrian, her voice tight. You were supposed to meet me at the venue. I had a meeting run late. I texted you. You always have meetings running late. It's our wedding, Adrian. Can you at least pretend to care? The table went silent. My father looked thunderous. My mother looked mortified. Adrian looked trapped. Of course I care, he said, but his voice was flat. I'm here, aren't I? Physically, yes, but mentally? You're somewhere else. You've been somewhere else for months? Vivienne. My father's voice was a warning. This is not the place. But Vivienne ignored him, her eyes locked on Adrian with something like desperation. Do you even want to marry me? The question hung in the air, toxic and real. Yes, Adrian said finally. But there was a pause before the word, a hesitation that everyone heard. Vivienne stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I need air. She left, and after a moment my mother followed. My father glared at Adrian with undisguised anger. Fix this, he said flatly, or the deal is off. It's not a deal, Adrian said, something flashing in his expression. It's a marriage. In this family, there's no difference. After my father left, Adrian and I were alone at the table. He looked at me with something like desperation. You're quiet through all this, he said. It's not my place to comment. But you're thinking something. I can see it. I considered him for a long moment. I'm thinking that marriage shouldn't feel like imprisonment. If it does, maybe you should reconsider. And disappoint everyone? Break the engagement? Do you know what that would do to your sister? I know exactly what it would do, I said quietly. But I also know what going through with a marriage you don't want does to everyone involved. That's worse. He stared at me. You speak like you have experience. I speak like someone who has learned to recognize patterns. Clara, he leaned forward, can I be honest with you? I'd prefer you weren't, I said, standing. Whatever you're about to say, it won't help anything. Marry my sister or don't, but make a choice and stop torturing everyone with your indecision. I left before he could respond. The wedding happened on a perfect June day. Everything was flawless. The flowers, the venue, the weather. Vivienne looked like a princess in her custom gown. Adrian looked like a man attending his own execution. I stood beside my sister and held her bouquet during the ceremony. I watched her face as she said her vows, saw the desperate hope there, the need for this to be the thing that finally made her feel secure. And I felt something unexpected. Pity, because I knew what came next. I knew that this marriage would make her miserable in ways she couldn't yet imagine. That Adrian would grow more distant, more resentful. That she would transform into the exact kind of demanding, insecure wife she had once mocked me for being. The reception was lavish. I gave my maid of honor speech, carefully crafted to be warm without being effusive, supportive without making promises about their future happiness. To Vivienne and Adrian, I concluded, may you find exactly what you're looking for in each other. It was technically well-wishing, only I knew it was also a warning. The party continued into the early hours. I danced with my father, made small talk with relatives, and gradually faded into the background the way I had practiced. At midnight, I slipped away to my hotel room and booked a flight to London. I was done. I didn't attend their first anniversary party. I was in London, launching my own boutique investment firm that specialized in Asian markets. My father had been furious when I turned down the executive position he had offered at Ashford Pharmaceuticals, but I no longer needed his approval. I didn't attend their second anniversary either. By then, I was in Tokyo, closing a deal that would make me independently wealthy enough to never think about money again. But I heard things through my mother's increasingly strained phone calls. Vivienne was struggling. The marriage was struggling. Adrian was distant, possibly unfaithful. They fought constantly. She had confronted him about a woman he worked with. and he had denied everything, but with that same hesitation, that same pause that made the denial worthless. "You should come home," my mother said during one call. "Vivienne needs her family." "Vivienne needs to handle her own marriage," I replied. "I can't fix this for her." "Don't you care about your sister?" I thought about that question for a long time after the call ended. Did I care? Yes, actually. Despite everything, despite knowing what she was capable of in another life, I cared. But caring didn't mean sacrificing myself to solve problems she had created. Their third anniversary passed, then their fourth. I built my empire quietly, deliberately, never returning home for more than a week at a time. I dated occasionally, slept peacefully, and lived a life entirely separate from the Ashford family drama. And then, 1 month before what would have been the 5th anniversary where I drowned, my mother called with news. Vivienne left Adrian. I sat up in my London apartment, staring out at the rainy city. What? She finally had enough, found evidence of multiple affairs, took it to a lawyer. The divorce will be finalised within weeks. Is she okay? No. My mother's voice was raw. She's destroyed Clara. She gave him everything, and he never loved her. She's saying he married her to get close to the Ashford connections, that he never cared at all. Which was probably true. Adrian had married Vivienne for the same reason he would have married me: ambition. The difference was that Vivienne had believed in the fantasy. Is she there? Can I talk to her? She won't talk to anyone. She's locked herself in her apartment. Clara, I'm afraid she'll do something stupid. For the first time in 5 years, I felt genuine alarm. I'm coming home. I flew back to New York the next day and went directly to Vivienne's apartment. She looked like a ghost of herself. Thin, pale, her beautiful face hollowed out by crying. Clara, she said when she opened the door, and then she was sobbing in my arms. I held her, this woman who had killed me in another life, and felt the strangest mix of emotions. Anger at what she had been capable of, pity for what she had become, and underneath it all, something like forgiveness. We sat on her couch, and she told me everything. The affairs, the lies, the way Adrian had made her feel crazy for suspecting things that were absolutely true. The gaslighting, the manipulation, the slow erosion of her self-worth. It was my marriage, reflected back at me through someone else's eyes. I gave him everything, she whispered, everything, and he never wanted me. He wanted God, Clara. I think he wanted you. I went very still. What? He talked about you sometimes, about how you had built your own life, how you were independent and successful. He would compare me to you, usually after we fought. Clara wouldn't be like this. Clara understood ambition. She laughed bitterly. I was so jealous of you. Your whole life I was so jealous. And then I got the guy, the ring, the wedding, everything you should have had. And it was worthless. Vivienne, I'm sorry. She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. I'm sorry for all of it, for competing with you, for always trying to take what was yours, for being such a terrible sister. I thought about the lake, the water, her hands pushing me under. But that hadn't happened in this life. In this life, she was just a broken woman who had learned the same lessons I had learned, just through a different path. You weren't terrible, I said quietly. You were young. We both were. You're being kind. You're always kind, even when I don't deserve it. I'm not kind. I'm just beyond it. Beyond the competition, the jealousy, all of it. There's nothing to win, Vivienne. It's all empty. We sat in silence for a while, and I realised something profound. By removing myself from the equation, by letting Vivienne have the life I had lived, I hadn't just saved myself. I had saved her too, because she had learned, without my intervention, without my destruction, that the things we thought we wanted were just beautiful prisons. "What are you going to do now?" I asked. "I don't know. Father is furious about the divorce, says it makes the family look bad. Mother wants me to reconcile. Everyone has an opinion except me." "Then find one." She looked at me. "How?" "Come to London. Work with me for a while. Get away from all of this and figure out who you are without their voices in your head." "You'd let me do that? After everything?" "Yes," I said simply, "because everyone deserves a chance to start over." Vivienne came to London 2 weeks later. She worked in my firm, starting at the bottom the same way I had. She was terrible at first, too used to charm solving her problems. But slowly she learned. She grew harder, more competent, more genuine. We never talked about Adrian. We never talked about the competition that had defined our childhood. Instead, we built something new. Not quite friendship, but something like mutual respect. 6 months after Vivienne arrived, Adrian showed up at my office unannounced. "Clara?" He looked older, tired. "I need to talk to you." "I have nothing to say to you." "Please, just 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I let him in. He sat across from my desk, looking at me with something I finally recognized as desperation. "I made a mistake," he said, "marrying Vivienne, the whole thing. I should have waited, should have pursued you." I almost laughed. "You pursued the Ashford connection. The sister didn't matter." "That's not true." "It's entirely true. You married Vivienne because I wasn't available and she was. You would have married me if I had been there instead. Either way, you never cared about the person, just what we represented. That's not fair. It's completely fair." I leaned forward. "Adrian, you don't love either of us. You love the idea of love, the appearance of a perfect life, but you have no idea how to actually be in partnership with another person. And unless you figure that out, you'll just keep destroying anyone who gets close to you." "I can change." "Maybe, but not with me, and not with Vivienne. We're both done being your mirrors." He left, and I never saw him again. I heard through my mother that he married someone else within a year. Another society woman, another strategic match. I hoped, for her sake, that he had learned something, but I doubted it. 5 years after the engagement party, where I watched Vivienne accept my ring, I stood in my London office and looked at the empire I had built. Multiple successful companies, investments across 3 continents, a reputation for brilliance that had nothing to do with my family name. Vivienne had started her own branch of the business in Singapore. She was good at it, better than anyone expected. We talked monthly, sometimes about business, sometimes about nothing at all. We weren't close exactly, but we were something better, separate, independent women who no longer needed each other to define ourselves. My parents had eventually accepted that I wasn't coming back to New York permanently. My father even admitted, grudgingly, that I had built something impressive. My mother still asked about marriage and grandchildren, but with less vigour, as if she sensed I had moved beyond the life she had planned for me. I dated occasionally. One relationship lasted nearly 2 years before we both acknowledged it had run its course and parted amicably. I was happy alone and happy with company, capable of both, which felt like its own kind of victory. On the anniversary of the day I had drowned in my first life, I went to a lake outside London and sat on the shore. The water was calm, reflecting the afternoon sky. I thought about the woman I had been, desperate, erased, dying for scraps of love from people who didn't value her. Then I thought about the woman I was now, the woman I had built from nothing but knowledge and determination. I hadn't destroyed anyone to get here. I hadn't needed revenge. I had simply removed myself from a story that was never mine to begin with, and let them all discover what happened when I wasn't there to be their foundation, their mirror, their victim. Adrian and Vivienne had destroyed themselves through their own choices. My family had learned they couldn't control me, and I had discovered that the best revenge wasn't revenge at all. It was becoming untouchable. I stood up from the lakeshore, brushed off my dress, and walked back to my car. Behind me, the water stayed calm, peaceful, just water with no ghosts beneath the surface. I had drowned once in another life, but in this one, I had learned to swim.